So in our last video, I left off talking about comparing the TS's and the significance level number, our p-value, Jesus, between MANOVA model 1 and 2. And the reason being is, I mentioned before, and I will still mention it again, when you're considering MANOVA, you want to take in consideration your intercorrelations and your group differences in your data. So we know that we definitely don't have any group differences because we have 12 people in each group. So that's X'd out. But we also have to consider our intercorrelations. So earlier in my videos, one of them, we actually ran a correlations test between trustworthiness and approachability and credibility. So with trustworthiness and approachability, we found that these two were highly correlated and positively correlated with one another. And then with credibility and approachability, we found that they were little to not correlated with one another. So just thinking about that, I want to show you guys what it's gonna look like when we take this into consideration. And for anybody that's looking out here, take this in consideration as well. So, looking at our MANOVA model 1, and the only test statistic that I'm going to look at is pillar trace, just because. Anyways, so pillar trace, we have 1.102 and a significance level of 6.3, and I'll just remember this number because that's all I can remember because I have short-term memory. And then, so 6.3, there you go. And then for our MANOVA model 2, we actually notice that it's decreased at a 0.636. And then we also have a decrease, or a smaller p-value as well. Not a smaller p-value, a larger p-value. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I don't know why I'm even thinking about that. Anyways, so just to take it in consideration, we notice that for highly correlated variables, we have 1.12, and then for little to no correlated variables, which is the case for model number 2, MANOVA model 2, it's 0.636. So really looking at it, you can see that there's a difference. So this is kind of what you this is what you want to take into consideration when you're looking at correlations. So essentially what you see here, you see a higher pillar trace value for our trustworthiness and approachability than for approachability and credibility. So just taking into account those correlations can really help you, because now I'm a believer. I am a believer now. Great. So that's nice. The next thing that we want to do, MANOVA essentially is like ANOVA in a sense that it tells you that there's a difference, but it doesn't tell you which or where the difference is. So you have to follow up with it. So one way to follow up with this is to conduct an ANOVA. So the first, no, that's not the one. So the first command that we're going to run an ANOVA for our MANOVA 1 model. And an ANOVA for our MANOVA model number 2. Ouch. For MANOVA MANOVA model 2. Yay! And MANOVA model 1. Alright, so now that we've done that, we're going to run that again. And then we're also going to run this one. So just looking at this, we see that response 1 and response 2, so that's approachability and then credibility, not credibility, approachability and trustworthiness. Hold up, let me make sure. Okay, so trustworthiness and then approachability. So approachability, trustworthiness, approachability. So we see that there are significant differences within groups or between groups, between your facial expressions for them. So so there's significant differences between trustworthiness and approachability in terms of facial expressions. So in essence, it does confirm for our MANOVA. It confirms for the ANOVA ANOVA. Man, this is hard. This ANOVA, the findings here, provide us support for the results that we found in the MANOVA for the MANOVA Model 1. So there are significant differences between facial expressions in regards to approachability and trustworthiness. So now breaking it down for our MANOVA model number 2, we see that there is a significant difference for response 1, which would be approachability and credibility. Yes. So approachability, there is significant difference in facial expressions for this, but when we look here at response number 2, which is credibility, we're not seeing that significant value here. So this suggests that there is no difference, or there is no significant difference between facial expressions in regards to credibility. Now overall, we can see that ANOVA, so for our multivariate test, our MANOVA, it led us to believe that there are differences in everything for MANOVA Model 1 and MANOVA Model 2. However, while univariate tests supported MANOVA Model 1 from the MANOVA Model number 2, well, when we ran that ANOVA on MANOVA Model number 2, we found something completely different. It partially supported it. So in this case, we can, so in essence, it kind of tells you that you want to be careful when you're interpreting your results, and it highlights the importance of following up on your findings, because you may find something that's not really there, or you may find something with multivariate, well, in essence, you can find something that may not be there, or vice versa, and it's really good to find some more backup for that. So I think with this, we've learned a lesson in follow-ups today. So now, moving on to the contrast, we can actually create a linear model based on the predicting variable, and run our contrast or create the contrast parameters. So we're going to do a trustworthy model. So that's what that command does. It creates the trustworthy model and acts on the linear model function. And then we can do the same thing for approach model, and that's what that command does. And the same thing for credibility, and we call it cred model. So now that we've created our models, now we can execute summary.lm to get the contrast parameters. So looking at trustworthiness and comparing happy to blank facial expressions and comparing mad to blank facial expressions, we see that happy facial expressions are significantly different. There is a significant difference between blank facial expressions and happy facial expressions in terms of trustworthiness. But we don't see that for the case for mad facial expressions and against blank facial expressions. So as far as, and it's also significant. Well, significant F value. There we go. So as far as trustworthiness goes, trustworthy is pretty much cleared. Now let's do the approach model. So we see some significant differences here between comparing our groups. So we see for happy against blank facial expressions, we see that as a significant value. So this suggests that the happy group is the happy facial expressions for the ratings for approachability are different from the blank facial expressions ratings. Not ratings, but y'all know what I mean. I'm tired. Anyways, man, I really need some water. I should go get water. I'll get it after this video. Anyways, for the mad facial expression group versus the blank facial expression group, we see that there is a significant difference between the two. And we see it's pretty good. So as far as approachability, that checks out. So now let's look at our credibility. So this is the interesting part about it. Just like I was mentioning back like in other ones, like minutes ago, you always want to make sure you have some follow-ups and breakdowns for your data, so you can make sure you're finding something that's there, and then yeah, pretty much it. But anyways, so as far as happy versus blank, we see that there is a significant difference, but for mad versus blank, we don't see that difference. So it's suggesting that in terms of credibility, mad facial expressions and blank facial expressions were given similar ratings for credibility. Whew, man. Oh, thank you, Jesus. We're almost towards the end. Anyways, so now that we have followed up with our contrasts, our ANOVAs, the next thing that we're going to want to do is our discriminant function analysis, or our DFA. So you can essentially use these after MANOVA to see how the dependent variables discriminate the groups. Let's go there. So in essence, it identifies variates. So the combinations of the outcome variables, dependent variables that discriminate the groups of the different cases that we have. Man. Alright. So the first thing that we're going to do, we're going to create a model for it, like we do everything else. So we're going to create facial DFA1. So this accounts for our approachability and trustworthiness, because we're always gonna be looking at correlations. And then we can execute the model. Ugh, lame. So in the next video, I'm actually going to highlight the next one, and I'm going to highlight the results.